Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining. Iskajyan Artsakhi Hayvichan. On September 27th, 2020, Azerbaijan launched an unprovoked full-scale military attack on the Republic of Artsakh. Sophisticated military equipment, white phosphorus, and foreign terrorists were used to commit egregious acts of violence against the indigenous Armenian population of the disputed region. A ceasefire agreement was signed on November 10th, 2020, but the war entered a new phase. In September of 2022, Azerbaijan again launched an unprovoked assault, this time within the internationally recognized borders of Armenia, attacking the villages of Vardenis, Goris, Sotk, and Chermuk. But the war again would take another sinister turn. On December 12th, of 2022, a group of Azeris calling themselves environmental activists set up a blockade of the Kashan mine in the Republic of Artsakh, claiming that the mining done in Kashan was illegal. Their actual intention was to block the Lachin corridor, the only direct road connecting the Republic of Artsakh with the Republic of Armenia, and restricting the free movement of people and goods across the two states. As a result, store shelves in Artsakh are running empty, and over 120,000 people remain under blockade, causing a humanitarian crisis. It is worthy to note that this action violates the November 2020 ceasefire agreement that stipulates that Azerbaijan is required to provide free and safe travel along the Lachin corridor. It is also worthy to note that evidence suggests that the government of Azerbaijan funds and supports these so-called environmental activists, providing them with food and tents, and busing participants to and from a hotel that they had occupied in Shushi. Moreover, many of these so-called environmental protesters appearing in videos and in media have been connected to the Azeri government, military, and the ruling Azeri political party. It is easy to see that the true motive of these so-called ecological protesters is state-sponsored terrorism. Today, we are joined by Iskajyan, a native of Los Angeles. Iskajyan has worked tirelessly for the Armenian cause for decades. He is the former editor of Haytug magazine. Previously, he served as the chairperson of the AYF Western region and as a member of the ARF Central Committee of the Western United States. Mr. Iskajyan is currently residing in Artsakh and serving as the executive director of the newly established Armenian National Committee of Artsakh. He will speak about the current situation in Artsakh and the struggles faced by the Armenians of Artsakh due to this blockade. He will have a short discussion followed by Q&A. Those who want to ask questions must write the questions in the Zoom chat.
Hi, Iskajyan. Good to be on. Thank you to you, ANC Boston, the Engagers in Boston, everyone for setting this up. So I think what's best is if we start with a little context and what's happened in the last, it would be 95 days now since the beginning of the blockade here in Artsakh. So for 95 days, the only road connecting Artsakh to Armenia and essentially the rest of the world has been shut off. We rely on that road for everything from goods and supplies to food to medicine to regular transport between Stepananert and Yerevan, and all the basic goods and necessities that come through that road. This blockade has affected every layer of society here, whether we're talking about young kids that had been trapped out and were unable to be reunited with their families, whether we're talking about over 30,000 students who for the majority of the last 3 months have been essentially denied an access to education. They haven't been able to go to schools, whether we're talking about the population that has been denied access to proper healthcare, As many of you guys know, for many of the surgeries and ICU care and intensive care operations, the majority of Artsakhis rely on the hospitals in Yerevan to do those procedures. And so many people have been locked out because of that. On top of that, Azerbaijan has done everything possible to exert every single pressure point onto the populace here. So we have, let's keep in mind, the blockade on one hand. On top of that, Azerbaijan has been cutting off gas. It was just again cut off tonight. And it has been cut off for the majority of the last 95 days. And for a good part of those 95 days, we've been in winter months, at times below 0 Celsius, temperatures. And on top of that, we've had an energy crisis here in the country because of Azerbaijan's refusal to allow access for Armenians to, repair damaged electrical grids. And because of that, for the majority of the last 90 days, we've been dealing with rolling blackouts, where once every couple of hours, we have a, blackout. My electricity, for example, just came on about an hour ago. All of this is Azerbaijan's attempt to try and ethnically cleanse the ethnic Armenian population here in Artsakh. They are doing everything possible to make life as difficult and to make the Armenians that live here not see a future. Well, we're lucky because the people of Artsakh are incredibly resilient. They've been through much and they will endure this as well. But it's important that we work towards, whether it's, through the ANC chapters across the United States, the Eastern region, the Western region, our ANC DC office, and all the Haitat branches around the world are working towards exerting the type of diplomatic pressure that will, we hope, lift this blockade. It's tough for so many people that are reeling post-war, a nation that's recovering post-war, to then have to deal with another crisis like this. And by all definitions, this is a humanitarian crisis here in Artsakh. I want to, I know that there's going to be a lot of questions. I want to dedicate a good chunk of our time to answering the questions that the folks that have logged on have.
So again, let me remind everybody, those who want to ask questions must write the questions in the chat, and then we will moderate the questions that Engergev will answer.
And, as we wait for those questions to come in, I think it's important to state that there has been an escalation in the crisis in the last 2 to 3 weeks now, where we've seen Azerbaijani troops fire into different regions in Artsakh, whether it's Marduni, Mardakert, and even in Stepananert, where 3 servicemen were killed just last week. This is following Aliyev's statements of asking or putting an ultimatum onto the people of Artsakh, essentially saying that they will either integrate, which is effectively going to be the ethnic cleansing of this population, or they will, quote unquote, be dealing with severe consequences, which we are fairly confident is the resurgence of violence and military aggression in the region.
And get a couple of questions have come in. I hope I can ask, how do we raise awareness in our local papers? How do we raise funds to benefit the people of Artsakh? Are there social media or other websites that you can refer us to best get our voice out?
Yes. So I think one of the most vital things that we have to keep in mind is the fact that we cannot wait for Artsakh to be dealing with a crisis to be engaged with Artsakh. Unfortunately, whether it's the diasporan populace or our compatriots in Armenia, sometimes our attention is shifted towards Artsakh when there's a war, when there's a humanitarian crisis, when there's a blockade. However, we have to make sure and we have to be cognizant of the fact that Artsakh is fighting for its survival every single day. And everything that we can do to help, and I use this term nation build, not charity, to help nation build throughout that time is absolutely vital. Some of the best things that we can do, and I mentioned this before, is get in touch with your local ANC chapters. We have been through the ANC DC office holding calls with various congressmen, various senators, various State Department officials, giving them on the ground briefings of exactly what's going on in Artsakh. That, coupled with the grassroots advocacy of our local chapters, of our ANC rapid responders, creates this type of critical mass that helps us exert the type of pressure diplomatically that we need. And it's with that pressure that we're able to, our DC office has just announced in the last few weeks, a bill that's going to be introduced in Congress. So all of that stuff is important. Secondly, if you want to raise your voice, platforms like Twitter are really important because they can help get the attention of various elected officials, various stakeholders, various media personalities, and the larger, general public. And lastly, I think the most important, some of the most tangible things that we can do is help build the security infrastructure of Artsakh. And to do that, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Organizations within our, organizational family have already taken this work on. The ARS has an incredible program to help build solar panels. And as you guys know, we're dealing with an energy crisis here. Those solar panels that are built, every single house that we can make sure has a solar panel that can heat their homes, that can provide electricity, that people can use to cook, and all the other necessities that one may, need. For every single house that we build that up for every community that we build that for, we build less of a reliance on Azerbaijan. If we can guarantee our energy security, our energy independence here in this country, that can do wonders for us. It can do wonders for the populace, and it could do wonders for our ability to withstand all the pressure that Azerbaijan throws our way. Projects like the solar panels, projects like those greenhouses, they help us withstand storms like this blockade. Because if we can guarantee that we are growing our own food, we have our own energy, then all of those things help mitigate so many of the pressures that Azerbaijan exerts onto this population.
And I have another question, if you don't mind. I can't imagine myself being under blockade. I can't imagine having lack of access to running water or electricity, because I live in America where I have every comfort and every resource to my availability. What kind of resilience, can you give us examples of the resilience of the people of Artsakh? Can you give us examples of how they are really pulling together as a people to weather? It's not a humanitarian crisis. It's state-sponsored terrorism. This is really state-sponsored terrorism.
Absolutely. I think let's start from the most basic of factors here. Because of that closed road, the food supply has been incredibly shortened here. The government has moved to a food rationing program, and we're talking about very basic necessities with long-term perishable goods. So you're talking about your regular everyday, you walk into the grocery store in the United States and you can, think of all the array of items and food supplies that you can possibly get. Here we're talking about rations of long-term perishable goods. So rice, beans, sugar, flour. Those are the basic necessities available. And unfortunately, things like fresh produce, fruit, vegetables, things that the most, vulnerable of our populations are absolutely dependent on, whether we're talking about young kids who need to have the adequate nutritional, needs met, to babies who need to have baby formula, to the sick who need to have certain, diet. All of those things have been restricted. And I can tell you the best way that this populace faces off against that is the way that people look after and take care of each other. I was in, the stores when the blockade was just first into effect. It was a couple of weeks into the blockade. And if you guys can remember in the United States during times like COVID, when people were fighting over like the most basic of supplies, where there also was plenty of, right? We didn't really have a real shortage of things, but you can see fights in the grocery stores and news items about that. Here, you're talking about a real humanitarian crisis. You're talking about walking into a, food market, and let's say there's a couple of fruit left in the entire market. And one person walks in and this genuinely happened to me. He asked the storekeeper, he's like, hey, do you guys have any of this like quote unquote fruit? And the guy says, yeah, we have two. Do you want both? And he says, no, I'll take one. Somebody else might come in and need the other. So it's with that mindfulness, it's with that spirit of community. It's with the fact that no matter what we're facing, we know that we're facing this together. That's how the population of Artsakh shows its resilience and at the same time shows its love for each other.
Thank you, Inged. And again, reminder to all the participants, please email please chat your questions to host Ara Nazarian. Another question is a politically minded question. Can you speak about the three phases? The two phases before, three phases before Rupen Vartanyan was state minister of Artsakh, while he was state minister of Artsakh, and the current situation when he has resigned from his position as state minister of Artsakh. What's the social political situation like in Artsakh in those three phases?
So, look, a lot of change, especially during crisis, is by all means not positive in most scenarios. I can tell you that Rupen Vartanyan's tenure here was looked at very positively. It gave hope to the populace that one, a diasporan of his stature, of his ability, of his, reach, was willing to come to Artsakh to take such a crucial position and to utilize his resources for the betterment of the country. I can tell you that when he left and he was replaced recently by Gurgen Nersesyan, who is the new state minister here in Artsakh, it did unfortunately kind of take a demoralizing hit to the population, which obviously isn't good in these scenarios, but I'm glad and I'm very proud to say that Mr. Vartanyan is still in Artsakh. He still commands some important roles here within the country. He's still carrying on very vital projects for the betterment of Artsakh. So that's good. And we've always had, and I can say this about just about every single state minister, our ANC Artsakh office has had a very good relationship with all the state ministers. We were, whether it was Artsakh Beglarian, whether it was Mr. Ruben Vartanyan, who we've met with multiple times, conducted interviews with, and he was very available to us, or whether it's Mr. Nersesyan, the new appointee. One thing I would say, and I'd like to shed light about when it comes to Artsakh and it comes to politics in Artsakh, things come and go, things change here, but the nature of Artsakh is a lot less, and this is a good thing, is a lot less politicized than almost anywhere else in the Armenian world. We know that we have this very small besieged republic, and we know that we can't let, especially in crucial times like this, especially in times of hardship like this, let politics be a divisive factor. So even when Mr. Vartanyan, was relinquished of his duties, his statements regarding, the future were all positive, were that we should work with the government, whoever the government is, we should work for the betterment of Artsakh, and we have to, move forward positively and constructively. And my hope is that, I know my office will do that. I know all our Haitad branches around the world will do that. And I hope the diaspora sees it like that as well. It's unfortunate like that Mr. Vartanyan had to leave, but this is our one republic. This is an existential fight for the, life and future of Artsakh. And we can't let politics be a divisive factor in it, no matter what happens.
Thank you, Ingrid. You kind of touched on it right now. I'll just, pad it a little by asking, we're seeing some efforts to sow seeds of division among the people of Artsakh. Uh, what, how do you see this playing on the ground, or is this something that you personally disagree with in the characterization? Do you feel the people of Artsakh are fully united, or do you feel some sort of
Yeah.
external forces trying to influence the situation?
It's very tough for external forces to try and influence the situation, to try and break the willpower and the resilience of the people of Artsakh. Because, like as I mentioned earlier in the last question, above politics, above any of these petty discussions to a certain level, it is the interests of the state, are the interests of the future of Artsakh, and I think everyone here is cognizant of it. You're talking about a population that's not been through just one war, but two of them, that has seen much, that's seen humanitarian crises, multiple wars, ceasefire violations on the daily. So they are very cognizant of the fact of why they are here, of what they're fighting for, and it goes above and beyond politics to so many degrees. So I would say, look, it's impossible to say everybody is united on every single thing, but the overwhelming majority is absolutely united on most of the important things here in the country, whether that is the future of Artsakh, that is the self-determination and independence of Artsakh, that is the fact that Artsakh will never exist under an Azerbaijani regime, and the populace, all the compatriots that live here, that is something that they're willing to absolutely fight for to the highest degree.
The willpower of the people of Artsakh is certainly strong, but what about their physical needs? I would like to ask, are the food, the stores, the food in the stores, is it holding out? Is there food coming in from the Republic of Armenia itself? And is there enough food to last another winter? So another 1 year, maybe. What is the current food and resources situation like in Artsakh?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, under probably no condition should we expect this, and not should we expect, as in Azerbaijan won't try to do it. But we have to do everything possible. This blockade is lifted as soon as possible. 100 days of blockade is incredibly tough for a populace. And if you're talking about a year of blockade where kids can't have access to education, where everything essentially comes to a halt, where you have no gasoline, no ability for transport, and no goods and services coming into the country, that is by many means one of the worst things that can happen to this populace. And I don't think that will happen. I believe that through our united efforts collectively in the diaspora and throughout Artsakh, we'll get this blockade lifted. In terms of what the food supply situation is, through the mediation of the Russian peacekeepers, we've been able to bring in some food goods into the country, but all of those are things that are rationed. All of those are things that are used in the most dire humanitarian circumstances. You're not talking about going through. So if I go into a supermarket today, one of the biggest ones that let's say in any other normal day would have like 30 rows of shelves. Today there's one row of shelves, and on that row of shelves you can find rice, you can find sugar, you can find flour, you can find wheat. And all of those things you have to get with a coupon that the government provides, because we have a rationing system. Everyone watches how much they buy and how much they use. And none of those things that, if you were to take a nutritional chart that we see in the United States, where you're supposed to get your daily intake of like fruits, vegetables, poultry, whatever, that does not exist, unfortunately. It is about maximizing whatever, little that exists and making sure that it's evenly distributed throughout the population. But it is not, absolutely, it is not something that we should normalize. It is absolutely not something that we should carry forward.
Thank you, Ingrid. And again, I have to remind everybody, if you have questions, please chat to one of the hosts, to the host. More questions. You touched upon the solar panels, which is great, but what about the greenhouses? So the Armenian Relief Society and Armenian Tree Project have been helping to build greenhouses in Artsakh to secure food. Is it a very profitable system? How much food is being produced? And what stage is the project in? And how can the diaspora, us in America, help?
Yeah. So I think laying down some context is really good for this. I can tell you that before 2020, before the war, Artsakh had abundant agricultural land where we were growing wheat. We had plenty of farms and open agricultural fields for various fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, we've lost much of that during the 2020 war. And as you guys are familiar with the situation during this blockade, Artsakh has been very reliant after 2020 on all of those goods and produces coming in from the outside. So when and why I mentioned that we need solar panels, that we need greenhouses, it is to address the two most lacking, sectors during this blockade. We need energy. That unfortunately we rely on that road. We rely through the, someone would say good graces, I would say the bad graces of Azerbaijan. And two, we need to make sure that we have a food source within the country, that no matter what happens, whether we're in war, whether we're in blockade, we can be self-sufficient. Though the self-sufficiency, I think, is the key for Artsakh in all fields and sectors. Greenhouses, I think, are a miracle here. The greenhouses that we do already have through the amazing work of organizations like the ARS, Armenian Tree Project, Artsakh support body that have been building these greenhouses throughout the years. They're actually some of the things that are helping sustain the population now during the blockade. The very few limited amounts of fruits and vegetables that we have, I would say just about all, if not the vast majority of them, come from those greenhouses. And if we were able to double, triple, quadruple those numbers, which I promise you is something that can be done, we can mitigate this crisis and future crises here in Artsakh. We can make sure that, one, we're giving people jobs, even during this, blockade, which has caused so many layoffs and so many businesses from closing. And two, we can guarantee our own food supply. We can make sure that during the winter months, where the agricultural crop fields are not, vast majority are not working, we use these greenhouses to produce, so many of those vital goods. Thank you for everyone that braved this out. As you guys know, we have electricity problems here. Often we have Wi-Fi and internet connectivity problems. So at any time, it's expected for our internet to drop off, as it just did. Though I'm glad that this one only lasted a few minutes, and we can keep connecting with you. God and John, if I missed any questions, please go ahead so that I may answer them.
Thanks so much, Inge. So last week we witnessed an ambush and murder of 3 Armenian policemen by Azeris. How has this changed the dynamics on the ground?
Mm-hmm.
How do the people view this egregious, again, act of terrorism?
Yeah. So unfortunately, the 3 lives of servicemen that we lost, all of whom had families, all of whom were, young fathers, needs to be looked at in the larger context of what's been happening in the last 2 to 3 weeks. Following Aliyev's ultimatum of using more force to, essentially get what it wants out of the population of Armenia. We've seen firings into residential areas, into farms, into agricultural fields, from areas in Artsakh like Iskajyan, Mardagert, Marduni, and unfortunately accumulated with the attacks that were very specifically planned. These were not in.
We think it's best to leave this discussion for tonight. We will certainly get in touch with Gev another time so we can have more discussions like this in the future. These are just the realities of life in Artsakh. The internet is unreliable. The infrastructure is not as strong as in America, unfortunately. I would like to conclude with some closing remarks. It is clear to all Armenians and those who have studied Armenian history what the intentions of the current Azeri government is. It is ethnic cleansing and genocide. Let's be clear, a state that uses its vast oil reserves to bribe foreign politicians and tour foreign journalists around this country for favorable press, by definition does not have an independent environmentalist movement. Azerbaijan regularly ranks the bottom in human rights and press freedoms. Had George Orwell been alive today, he probably would have titled his famous book 2020, writing ironically about the newspeak employed by the Azeri government. Currently, Aliyev's party controls just over 50% of seats in the parliament, which is a modest figure until you account for the fact that the second largest party in the Azeri parliament does not even control 3% of parliamentary seats. Aliyev is currently in his 20th year as president of Azerbaijan, having taken over the post from his father, who served 10 years himself. Racism against Armenians is a state policy made only the more dangerous by the deep military and political ties Azerbaijan has to Turkey. March is Women's History Month in America. A little more than a week ago, the whole world celebrated International Women's Day on March 8th. Women have had a significant role to play in Armenian history and Armenian culture. We Armenians honor the sacrifices women have made for our freedom and survival. One recent such example is Anush Abedyan. Anush Abedyan was an Armenian woman who was serving in the Armenian army during Azerbaijan's invasion within the internationally recognized borders of Armenia last September. She was captured and mutilated. Her finger was cut and placed in her mouth, and one of her eyes was gouged out, and a stone was put in its place. Videos of her mutilation were circulated on Telegram channels. This is but one example of the trauma that Armenians have to face since the war in 2020 started. Experts are currently warning of more planned attacks by Azerbaijan. It seems that Aliyev's bloodlust is insatiable. His army has already broken numerous ceasefire agreements and invaded within the internationally recognized borders of Armenia. Armenians are left asking their non-Armenian friends and the international community, what is the exchange rate between innocent Armenian blood and Azeri oil? There are some things that we can do to stop Azeri aggression. One example is to call your local member of Congress and urge them to support House Resolution 108, which condemns the blockade of Artsakh, investigates crimes against humanity targeting Armenians in Artsakh, and suspends military aid to Azerbaijan. Additionally, there is a foreign aid letter circulated by the Armenian caucus that they can also be a part of. It is all up to us to help the people of Artsakh. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ngergev. Good night. Parelus Polor Artsakhi Hayuchan.